couple of months ago, we looked at the book of Revelation. The last couple of chapters, I'm sure you know them, you remember them well. The vision of the city, the New Jerusalem descending out of heaven. And we see in that last chapter of Revelation, verses 14 and 15, these words. Blessed are those who do his commandments, that they may have the right to the tree of life and may enter through the gates into the city. But it continues. But outside are dogs and sorcerers and sexually immoral and murderers and idolaters and whoever loves and practices a lie. Why, after 20 chapters of Revelation, is that verse still there? Why, when judgment has been passed, is there still evil in the world in that last chapter of Revelation? Well, I want to say that it represents a state that exists within all of us. Because the teaching is that our evils are not banished, they are not completely destroyed, they are merely set aside as we go through the process of regeneration. Even as an angel, even when you enter heaven in the spiritual world after death, you will never be perfect. But the thing about it is that those evils that continue to exist in our life, they're put to good use. They remind the angels of their reliance upon the Lord, because it is the Lord that makes heaven and not anything of the angels themselves. And that is something which we occasionally need to be reminded of. We need to remember that we are not in heaven because of anything of us. We are in heaven because of what is of the Lord in us. But those evils are also the means by which we grow. They become the stuff of life that move us forward. In the Bible, when we talk about temptation, and this word temptation, it often means a test. So, for example, Genesis chapter 22, very well-known story. This is the attempted sacrifice of Isaac. It says right at the beginning, now it came to pass after these things that God tested Abraham. And we see it elsewhere. We read it this morning in Deuteronomy chapter 8. This was in verse 2. I don't know if you spotted it happened later on in the chapter as well. And it's repeated again in Deuteronomy chapter 13, this idea of a test. And when we think of temptations, we can also look in the Bible to all of the battles that take place and the wars that take place, so that are recorded, particularly in the Old Testament. They're all talking about temptation. Now, the thing that I want to say is, it is not the Lord who tempts or tests us. I know that is the appearance that you see in these verses from the Word. It looks as though the Lord tests or tempts us. But that is an appearance. You see, the Lord has no need to test us. He knows exactly who and what we are. It's us. We don't know who and what we are, and it's for us to discover. Why do we blame God for tests and temptations? Well, I think it's because we cannot face the truth about ourselves. When we turn to the teachings of the church, we find statements like this, that temptation is just a conflict of our loves. So he writes here, the distress and anxiety caused by things that clash with a person's loves. This is the cause. It is our loves. This is where temptation comes from. One of my colleagues in America, Grant Schnarr, has a lovely little book called Spiritual Recovery. We have used it several times in Canberra, and I would highly recommend it. It's based upon the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. But Grant takes you through this process, and he makes a number of very useful observations about the process of spiritual growth. And he talks about a kind of threshold that we all have, and it's kind, I suppose, of a tolerance of our evils. If you think about the way that we exist, we live in a kind of an equilibrium where our life travels along very largely on an even keel in a single direction. Sometimes there's an up, sometimes there's a down, but we're basically pretty stable. And we come to accept everything about who we are as though it's perfectly normal and perfectly good. And we need a crisis to come to realize that there's a problem. We're very good at putting our faults at the back of our minds, our discomforts at the back of our minds. It's like living with a toothache. It sits and it niggles away. And you think, oh, I'll put up with it, it'll go away. It's only when it becomes unbearable that you decide you need to go to the dentist and get it sorted. And that's the way we approach our faults. And so the thing to realize about the crisis, the temptation, is it's actually a gift. It confronts us with our underlying and often suppressed dissatisfaction with our lives. It's a dissatisfaction we typically blame on others or circumstances. But we have to realize, and we have to be confronted with the fact, it's my fault. And if I don't do something about it, nothing will change. Now, if you don't believe that about yourself, spend some time watching people. Have a look at the people around you, and occasionally you will see someone who spends a great deal of time and energy and effort blaming their circumstances, blaming the people around them for how miserable they are. And yet you can see, with that distance, you can see how often actually it's their own fault. It's their own behaviour and attitudes that brings them to where they are. The only reason that observation is of any value is when we turn it around and realise that it applies to ourselves. Unless and until we confront the problems in our own lives, nothing will change. And that is a difficult truth to accept, but it's also very liberating because it gives us a path out. It helps us to realise that we actually have some power and some agency over the misery that we experience in our life. Now, I'm going to give you a quick crash course on some of the things Swedenborg writes about temptations. He talks about levels of temptation. So I'm going to start with the natural temptations here. Natural temptations are not real temptations at all, but merely anxious cares resulting from attacks on people's natural loves caused by misfortune, sickness, and abnormal condition of the blood and fluids in the body. Now, I'll just let you contemplate what that is, especially what the blood and fluids in the body are. But the key thing I'm going to point out is the fact that he says these natural temptations, and these are the ones we really feel very strongly and most obviously. These natural temptations are not real temptations, but they do help us understand what's going on. A temptation being a battle between two loves that exist within us. And the best way to put it is that it's when the love of another piece of cake does battle with the love for living a life which is healthy and fit and strong. What happens? One of them wins, yes? One of them wins. And this is what's going on. This is temptation. It is the battle between two loves that exist within us. And the question is always, which one wins? So natural temptations help us understand what's going on, but they can also be the training ground for us facing spiritual temptations. Because in that struggle between the extra piece of cake and the living a healthy life, we learn the things like the acknowledgement of the problem, the things like self-compulsion, which help us deal with the deeper temptations that we will face. True temptations are where our love of self and love of worldly things comes face to face with love of the Lord and love of the neighbour. Just the other day, someone posted this on Facebook, and I thought this was a really useful little example of what we might be talking about. If you choose money over love, you'll always be poor. So here is love of the world against love of the neighbour. But what I want to say about this is this can be an expression of a spiritual temptation. These can be real forces in our lives that are active and busy and fighting one another. Or it could just be a natural temptation because we could be more concerned about the way people see us, the way people view us in the world. Am I seen as a good person? That then throws that into a natural temptation state, which has no spiritual benefit to us at all. There's a couple of things I'd like to say about this state of temptation, which we all experience. You are only subject to a temptation because of a love that exists in your life. Now, I mean you to be encouraged by that, because if you don't have a love of the Lord and a love of the neighbour, there is no question, there is no temptation. So the only reason you face a temptation to do with love of the neighbour is the fact that you love the neighbour in some way. If you don't have a love of the neighbour, it's obvious what you're going to do. You're going to suit yourself. But as soon as love of the neighbour begins, then the conflict is set up. So it's a normal part of life. Temptation is something that's to be expected. And whenever we embark on some new endeavour, whenever we seek to make an improvement in our lives, life has a way of throwing up this question: how serious are you about what you're intending to do? Pam and I were in the supermarket yesterday, and we noticed an advert about, I think it was lung cancer. And the slogan, I suppose, at the top was, "Choose your hard." Do you face the battle of giving up the habit now? Or do you face the battle down the track with the medical, procedures and the struggle to breathe and so on? Choose your hard. But the other thing I'll say is, be gentle on yourself and be gentle on those around you. We often go through life kind of expecting a perfection. We expect ourselves to do things well and properly and do them every single time. We expect ourselves to relate to one another properly. But we don't. We don't. We get it wrong. And the thing is, the expectation of perfection is in itself actually a temptation, if you think about it. Because who is good? Who is good? One, God. Even Jesus says it. Who is good? God alone is good. You are not good. And if you expect perfection of yourself or of anybody else, you are putting yourself in the place of God. So be gentle. Be gentle with yourself and be gentle with others. I want to finish with a longish passage from the teachings, one of my favourites about this idea of spiritual temptation. Have a listen to what he says. They who have not been instructed about a person's regeneration suppose that anyone can be regenerated without temptation, and some that a single temptation is sufficient. But be it known that without temptation no one is regenerated, and that many temptations follow on, one after another. The reason is that regeneration takes place to the end that the life of the old man may die, and the new heavenly life be insinuated, which shows that there must needs be a fight. For the life of the old man resists and is not willing to be extinguished, and the life of the new man cannot enter except where the life of the old man has been extinguished. Hence it is evident that there is a fight on both sides. And this fight is a fiery one, because it is for life.